So, I wasn't planning on doing a part 2 for this What If, but the idea kind of attacked me out of nowhere. I was just minding my own business, signing package inserts, listening to Atlantis by Se4Ep6, and bam! Part 2 idea. So yeah, anyways, welcome to part 2 of What If Arctic and Foeslayer stayed in the Ice Kingdom. Let's see if I can swing another happy ending. Darkstalker may not have inherited his father's animus powers, but that doesn't mean Pyria is out of the woods quite yet. Frostburn, Arctic's first dragonette, may have inherited his powers, may be a contender for the throne, and may live in the palace, but her life was far from perfect. Growing up in the Icewing royal court was difficult, to say the least. Being the daughter of Arctic, famous for his rebellious scandal with the Nightwing, only made the entire situation worse. Frostburn grew up in isolation, coached daily by her grandmother, Icewing royals, and tutors. She learned Icewing history, studied all the previous great animus dragons and their gifts to the tribe, learned at her grandmother's side what their tribe needed to be the most powerful and perfect tribe in Pyria. In public, she was the perfect granddaughter, the most promising heir apparent, and very intriguing as a future political marriage among the other nobles. In private, however, her life was very different. Diamond molded Frostburn, told her what to read, what to say, what to think. She coached her daily, and clearly intended for her granddaughter to inherit her throne. But in private, she snubbed the dragonette, reminding her constantly that she had a duty to the tribe, and to Diamond, to make up for the disappointment her father had been. Frostburn, who had only met her father a bare handful of times, felt the ghost of his errors dragging from her wings her entire life. Snowfox, the queen's niece, outright and openly hated Frostburn. Before her hatching, Snowfox had been the uncontested and only heir to the throne. It was open, if unspoken, rumor that the bad walrus Frostburn had accidentally eaten as a dragonette that had nearly killed her had been poisoned by Snowfox. However, this was never proved, and her relative continued to do everything in her power to make Frostburn's life miserable if she couldn't have her killed. Worst of all, though, was Frostburn's own mother, Snowflake. Snowflake, who had never wanted to marry Arctic, who had never wanted to be dragged into royal politics. And yet, instead of marrying Arctic, she'd been relegated to nothing more than an heir-producing piece of a promise he'd made to escape his life. The fact that Arctic had left his engagement with Snowfall for a Nightwing of all creatures only compounded her misery. The embarrassment that she hadn't been good enough for him never left her. She was snubbed in public, dragons laughed at her behind her back and sometimes to her face. Frostburn was a daily reminder of Snowflake's embarrassment, of the ruining of her life, and she made sure to tell her daughter that as often as she could. And amidst all this, Frostburn didn't have a single dragon she could truly trust. Her grandmother wanted to use her mother hated her, and Snowfox openly wanted her dead. So when she met her half-siblings for the first and only time, Frostburn felt it was only to be expected that she grew jealous of them. It was just, she hadn't known. She hadn't realized dragons could be so kind to their dragonettes. Her half-siblings were happy, and they had each other, and when their Nightwing mother looked at them, Frostburn finally understood what the word love meant. She'd never gotten it before. Even her father, Arctic, who'd been as cold as his namesake with her, softened like snow melting in spring when his daughter, his other daughter, came bounding up, flinging herself into his wings with a babble of meaningless words. It left Frostburn feeling stricken. What was it? What was wrong with her? Why did her mother hate her? Why did Arctic abandon her? Why had he chosen this Nightwing and his half-breed embarrassments over an animus daughter? Frostburn realized there was something wrong with her. That was the only explanation. Her father loved his other dragonettes. Their mother played with them and cooed at them in a soft voice and smiled at them. Snowflake hadn't said a single word to Frostburn on the flight to the keep, had barely slowed down enough for her to keep up in the biting winds. Why had her half-siblings gotten everything? Their father, a real mother, happy days spent in peace, when Frostburn had nothing but a power she could only use once. Frostburn stared at her claws wordlessly for the last half of their visit. It was a stilted, awkward affair already, but after she made her realization, she could barely bring herself to look at Arctic. Why should she? He didn't love her. Not when he had those half-breed brats to dote on. Darkstalker didn't hate living in the Ice Kingdom. He loved their keep. He had friends in the nearby village. He loved exploring the snowy emptiness beyond their warm home, loved the glint of sun on ice, loved how Whiteout went half invisible when she pressed herself into fresh snow. But the older he grew, the more he yearned to learn the other half of his heritage, the Nightwing side. After all, he was 7 years old, nearly full-grown, and his mother was the only Nightwing he'd ever met. Though Darkstalker was half Icewing, nobody could tell looking at him. He was the spitting image of his mother. He loved hearing stories about her old kingdom, about the libraries, the schools, the markets, the festivals. Darkstalker loved the Ice Kingdom, but he yearned to know the Kingdom of Night, too. Whiteout did not share this desire. She turned up her nose at the idea of travel, assured Darkstalker she was content to stay here forever. He didn't hold that against his sister. She'd always been a homebody, preferring to tuck herself under their father's wing, while Darkstalker went out to explore. That was just the way she was. But her disinterest in the idea of the Night Kingdom did nothing to discourage his own obsession. And finally, after months of begging and badgering his parents, they agreed. Perhaps, after nearly a decade, it was time for a visit home. Arctic agreed to stay home with Whiteout, who protested vehemently the idea of leaving the snow. But Foeslayer and Darkstalker, who would blend in much more easily anyways, packed their bags and said their goodbyes and set off, flying south. Darkstalker loved exploring, but had never traveled more than a few days' flight from the keep, so he was excited even by the simple journey to the Night Kingdom. Foeslayer regaled him with memories of her old friends in life the entire way, and Darkstalker's excitement only grew. He couldn't wait to meet their tribe. And when they arrived, he wasn't disappointed. They flew over a jagged mountain range, and then there it was, the Kingdom of Night, laid out before them, built into ravines and studded with spiraling towers. While there, Darkstalker met many of his mother's old friends, who were shocked and overjoyed to see her. Some of them had dragonettes, who he met in turn. Foeslayer was the only other Nightwing Darkstalker had ever seen. He hadn't realized they came in so many colors, so many shades. There was only one confusing moment, when Foeslayer learned her mother had passed away only 2 years ago. Darkstalker had shrunk back at first, sure she would be devastated by the news. But his mother just got a strange look on her face, a mixture of relief and sadness, covered quickly with a blank mask. They didn't talk about his grandmother, his Nightwing one anyways, after that. He didn't have time to think about it anyways, because it wasn't long after that Darkstalker met the most beautiful, perfect dragon he'd ever seen in his life. Clearsight was a young seer who served the Nightwing Queen. They'd met by chance at a festival. She'd gone with her friends Listener and Thoughtful, who'd evidently teamed up to drag her away from her work. She'd frozen when she'd met him. Literally frozen, mouth half open, one talon lifted into the air. "It's you," she said, voice odd, and Darkstalker had been too absorbed with looking at her to even realize what she'd said until much later. From that moment on, Clearsight was all he could think about. He made it his mission in life to make her laugh. He flew to her chambers to pull her away, to go to the beach, to go hunting, to go flying in the moonlight. Despite her laughing claims that she had work, she always set it aside for him. It was 2 weeks after they met, when they were curled in a cave together, hiding from a thunderstorm that had rolled in seemingly without warning, that Clearsight told him about her visions. "Ever since I was a dragonette," she admitted, voice breathless with excitement, "I've had visions. About the tribe, about my friends, the weather, where a scroll will fall if I drop it. I have more visions than anyone else I know. But for my entire life, I've had 2 major visions. I see them when I sleep. I see them during the day. They're always here. She tapped at her forehead. And they've changed over the years, for better, for worse, 1,000 different possibilities. Darkstalker, I've seen them all. Wow, he'd said, awed by the sheer magnitude of her power. One is terrible, and one is wonderful, she whispered. The terrible one. She clawed at the ground anxiously. I don't know what it means yet, she said. I just know something horrible is coming, and I've spent my life trying to figure out what so I can stop it and save Pyria. Darkstalker's eyes widened. Could she really be seeing something that bad happen? Had she been living with that fear her entire life? It's a wave of darkness, she shivered. From the north. I see ice and things I can't explain. Every day it gets closer, and I don't know what to do. And it scares me, she whispered. Darkstalker had tucked a wing around her in the darkness, determined, suddenly, that he'd do anything he could to keep Clearsight's future from coming true, so he'd never have to hear her sound like that again. What about the wonderful vision? He asked tentatively. Clearsight turned, suddenly, smiling up at him, and her smile was everything. The moons, the starry sky, the first fresh snow over a frozen forest. You, she said simply, and me. That's the wonderful vision. It was a quiet little feeling in Frostburn's heart. So many dragons thought she had everything. She was the most favored royal Icewing. Her grandmother invited her to her councils, gave her a place of honor at feasts and in the throne room. She had personal tutors. She got the best of every hunt. And of course, she had her all-consuming animus power, the only thing about her anyone actually cared about. But they didn't know the truth. Frostburn had nothing that really mattered. Nothing. The only thing she'd gotten from her father was his power. And according to Grandmother, that didn't even belong to her. It was the tribe's, and it was Frostburn's duty to use it for their benefit. Only once. One gift. She didn't even have her own power in the end. It started just like that. A little niggling of discontent. A tiny flame of unhappiness, constantly melting the pristine ice of the perfect Icewing air. The first time she used her power, when she was 5 years old, Frostburn felt she'd pass out with the wrongness of what she was doing. But after she'd done it, after she'd enchanted her favorite silver bracelet to hover in the air above her talon for 10 seconds, Frostburn felt a rush, unlike anything she'd ever felt before. A rush of freedom, of rebellion. She'd done it. She'd used her power, and nothing had collapsed. The world hadn't ended. Nobody even knew about it. After that, Frostburn began experimenting. She enchanted her mother's necklace to make her wings ache every time she frowned at Frostburn, to make her claws dull every time she snapped at her. She enchanted an earring to always keep her scales pristine and shining, no matter whether she was hunting or training in the muddy snow or sitting calmly, watching Snowfox seethe with hatred. As the years passed, she placed littler enchantments here and there, little nudges to make her life easier. After all, the power was hers. Could anyone fault her for using the only gift she'd ever been given? But as time went on, she began to wonder. Why should she be content with only her own power? Frostburn was an animus. She was the most dangerous and valuable Icewing in the kingdom. Why then should she be content to have only her private spells and enchantments when her mixed-breed half-siblings had so much more? And why, she began to wonder, did she continue to tolerate her grandmother's presence, her mother's hatred, Snowfox's plots? She started simple. Nobody likes Snowfox. If she got caught, would anyone really be upset? Then Frostburn realized If she got caught, could anyone do anything to her? No, they couldn't. It was such a simple little thing. A thin, silvery chain. Elegant, delicate. Snowfox would love it. Frostburn slipped into her rooms that night and left it among her possessions. Then she had only to wait, each day growing more and more excited as she waited for the day her spell would take effect. Each morning she saw Snowfox, catalogued her jewelry, and waited for the day it would appear. 5 days after she'd placed the enchantment, Snowfox disappeared. It took a few hours for dragons to really begin noticing. It took a few days for them to begin to worry. They searched her chambers, of course, but found nothing. They didn't even notice the thin silver necklace lying abandoned on her floor. Frostburn sauntered in and picked it up. It was heavier now, weighed down by an opal pendant that hadn't been there before. Frostburn lifted it so the opal dangled by her mouth. "I bet you wish you'd managed to kill me when I was a dragonette now, cousin," she simpered. Frostburn tucked the necklace around her own neck and walked away. "Enchant this necklace so that when Snowfox puts it on, she will turn into an opal pendant. She will be trapped inside the pendant, but will still be alive. She will be able to hear and see everything around her, but she will never be able to escape." After all, it was only fitting that Snowfox get to watch Frostburn take everything that should have been her inheritance. It worked perfectly. Nobody suspected a thing. And 2 weeks later, when her mother snapped at her, Frostburn put her wings back and crafted another spell. She gained a new necklace, this one with the dusty sapphire pendant, and still nobody was the wiser. "Now," she thought, eyes on her grandmother, "it's about time I take the throne, I think. It is to be mine someday, after all. I think I've waited long enough." Perhaps, at the end, Diamond guessed it. Perhaps she realized her granddaughter should not be so fast, so strong, so hard to injure. Perhaps the shock in her gaze was the realization that her animus granddaughter had ignored her orders. Or perhaps it was simply because Frostburn had her claws buried in the old queen's stomach. As she stepped over the corpse to stare down the onlookers, claws stained bright blue, Frostburn had expected to feel something, maybe a sliver of regret or nervousness about her future. But all she could feel was how right it was. How finally, after years of nothing, she was taking something now. The only thing that she'd been denied now was her father. Arctic. Frostburn didn't just send guards to their keep. She went herself, at the head of their group, to take her father and his horrible dragonettes, and Nightwing, prisoner. They only found one of the dragonettes, despite turning the entire place upside down. The pathetic thing had confessed, through tears, that her mother and sibling had flown south to visit the Night Kingdom. Frostburn returned to her palace incensed, filled with rage, and with only half her prize. It was enough to begin, though. Arctic was furious with her. He fought the guards endlessly, demanding to see his daughter. Frostburn knew he no longer had any magic. Her grandmother had told her about his gift of power, so she knew he was no real threat to her. At first, she took great delight in leaving them in separate cells, inside of each other but unable to touch. The little half-breed cried constantly for her father, who looked like he was being driven slowly insane. But she eventually tired of the game and got on with her real plans. One little spell. That was all it took. One little alteration to her father. And then Arctic forgot about the whimpering little oddity in her dungeons and realized he had a much better, stronger, more perfect daughter to love. Frostburn felt her life was, then, almost perfect. If not for one thing. The Nightwing. The insidious Nightwing, Foeslayer, who'd caused all this. She'd been the one to tempt Arctic away. She'd been the one who caused Snowflake to hate Frostburn, to leave the rest of the nobles snubbing them. She couldn't be allowed to escape. Not her, and not Frostburn's half-brother. No. They wouldn't be allowed to go free. Not when Frostburn was queen. Not when she had an army. Not when she had her magic. The Night Kingdom wasn't so far away, after all. Darkstalker was curled in Clearsight's room in the palace, idly reading a scroll. He'd intended to leave hours ago, but she'd fallen asleep pressed against his back, claws still wet with ink, and he'd been unwilling to move and wake her. Clearsight slept so rarely, and she kept so busy, working for the queen, and always, trying to decipher the last of her visions. The terrible one. It was a perfect moment. Calm, peaceful. There was a steady drum of rain on the roof, the quiet flickering of the candle next to his parchment. He was reading history about the discovery and training of Nightwing powers. It fascinated him that he'd been so close to having powers like Clearsight's, had his egg only been exposed to the moons when he'd hatched. The silence was shattered as Clearsight jerked, suddenly, wings flaring as she screamed, a ragged, fearful sound. Darkstalker jolted, then whirled to her, almost knocking the candle into his scroll in his haste. "Clearsight? Clearsight!" he shouted, seizing her shoulders. Her eyes were glowing white, wide in terror as she shook. "Clearsight, what's wrong?" he demanded, wrapping his wings around her. The screaming cut off, and Clearsight shuddered, dropping into his hold. The shivering stopped, but she slumped heavily into him, exhausted. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "What happened?" he asked. "Sorry for what?" "It's happening," she moaned. "I saw it. She's coming." "Who?" Darkstalker pressed. She cringed. "Frostburn." Darkstalker froze. His half-sister? "Frostburn?" he asked. Clearsight pushed off him, gaining her talons and looking up at him. Her dark eyes were back to normal, but they were filling with tears. "I'm sorry," she said again. "I didn't see it in time. I couldn't warn you." "See what?" Darkstalker demanded, still holding her shoulders. Clearsight ducked her head. "She killed Queen Diamond," she said. "Frostburn is queen now." Darkstalker swallowed. "We knew she'd be queen eventually," he said hesitantly. "How is that terrible?" "I don't know how," Clearsight said. "But she has your father, and your sister. She took them prisoner. She's hurting them, and I can't see how." "Whiteout?" Darkstalker gasped, voice trembling as fear shot through him from nose to wingtip. "She took Whiteout?" Clearsight nodded. "That's not all," she whispered. "The Ice Wings. They're coming here next. They're going to attack us." "Why?" Darkstalker cried, still in shock at the news. "What? Why?" "To capture you," Clearsight said plaintively, capturing his gaze with her own. "Frostburn is coming here to take you. And she'll start a war to do it." Okay, guys, hear me out. I didn't go into this trying to leave you on a cliffhanger. I didn't want to do this to you. I just wanted to write a cute little romance, okay? I just wanted to do star-crossed lovers without all the magic and the murder. But then Frostburn started kind of becoming her own character, and then she started doing things, and guys, I'm sorry, okay? So yeah, this is gonna have a part 3, hopefully not a part 4, I don't know when, hopefully soon. I promise I won't leave poor Whiteout in the dungeons. I'm gonna make this right, guys. We're gonna have a happy ending if I have to just pull it from nowhere by the skin of my teeth. Just not this video. This one won't have a happy ending. If you guys like this video, feel free to comment below. If you hate me forever for taking my one single nice happy ending what if and turning it into an angsty cliffhanger, also comment below. Hearing your screams of pain helps me write the next part. It's a writer thing. As always, I love you guys. Hang in there for part 3 and have a blessed week.